This next passage tells about a defining moment in my life and explains how I actually got started with this. And this happened during a summertime picnic along the seashore, what I refer to as Down the Rocks, which is actually Clark Shell Road right along this stretch. And it goes, then a defining moment, and I'm staring out, I'm right at the edge of the water, I'm 11 years old, just staring out at the water, watching another lobsterman get hauled traps. Then a defining moment in my life occurred in the summer of 1959 during a family picnic down the rocks. The sight of a nearby skiff lobsterman hand hauling a wooden lobster trap drew me to the water's edge. Fascinated, I watched him pull a trap over the rail, open the door, measure and peg the lobsters, and rebait the trap. Right then and there, I said to myself, that's something I want to do for a living. And here I am. What a strange occurrence. I don't know if anybody else in the audience had a similar experience about something they wanted to do. There was a little voice, and I just remember saying to myself, right then and there, that's something I want to do.
Was it a nice warm day?
Oh, this was a summer day. This was a summer day. We were having a picnic on the seashore. Yeah, it was a beautiful day. And then there's another chapter in here, an inshore lobsterman's year-end review. And I break it down into 4 seasons, and I tell about some of the things that I experience out there, especially the harvages. And autumn's harvages are plentiful along the shoreline. By early October, now picture me, I'm out on the boat looking towards the shore. The foliage fires of sumac, woodbine, maple, and tupelo blaze just up from the shore. Sunshine blizzards of their crimson and gold leaves often rage during blustery days. Just picture those leaves going everywhere and the sunlight shining through those. That's that. Another chapter is about rare personal experiences. And every lobsterman during his career encounters certain things, and you have all these rare personal experiences. So I've included some of the top ones. And this here, you'll see a drawing, this particular scene. But I was lobstering off of Andrews Point, and this was in June. And there had just been a huge storm passed by offshore, and a huge groundswell was rolling in. Now I'm there hauling about 50 feet from shore. I thought I was far enough off and safe. Dead low tide, hauling traps, and the stern of my boat is pointed seaward towards the swells. And all of a sudden I looked up, and there was a huge swell, about 15 foot high, starting to crest. And here I am, while working on one 4-foot trawl about 200 feet from the shore, with my 18-foot skiff stern pointing seaward. I suddenly turned around in complete horror as a 20-foot high cresting swell. It was big. The steep sea had grounded out on an underwater hump, made worse by the extremely low tide. Reflex told me to gun me outboard, swing the boat around, and head into the monstrous sea. There was no time. The swell surfboarded me towards the barnacle-covered shoreline at about a 45-degree angle. I held onto the steering wheel for dear life, only to have the energy-packed swell first spin the skiff broadside and then flip it with a wall of water. Imagine just getting spun sideways, and all of a sudden there's that wall of water coming. You are powerless. The next thing I remember was a thud on the top of my head as the portside railing struck and pile drove me down into the 55-degree water. Luckily, my feet Didn't ground out. But I came up in the Bobby Skiff's water-filled cockpit. Now the skiff is overturned, and I come up inside and trapped inside me. Lost the trap rope stored in the boat, tangled my feet. Even worse, the grayish darkness, bubbles, and turbulence there destroyed my sense of direction. Completely disoriented. Which way is up? Or down? I have to breathe. I have to get out of here. I said, saying that to myself. I remember thinking, soon a faint inner voice emanating from the heart said, this is the end. What a strange sensation that was. You have to read. Lobster tidbits. And this chapter is all about, lobster biology, classification. It's all about the lobster. And the American lobster, which can grow over 3 feet long and weigh over 40 pounds, has survived the test of time so far. Even withstanding the fishing pressure and the advanced gear of recent times. A lobster is an animal which, like most other living things, possesses a gene pool with unique characteristics, exhibits specific behaviors, occupies a special niche in the marine ecosystem, and has a prime purpose to help balance marine nature and also to be food for others in the pyramid of life, and to survive, grow, and propagate its species. That covers it pretty well. Scientists and fishermen agree we know a lot about lobsters, but there's a lot we don't know about them. And this one lobsterman from Gloucester, Mark Ring, said, if the lobsters ever get figured out, they will be in trouble. Think about it. And then this next chapter is about the harvesting of lobsters and the big changes in the industry. And this passage is from The Lobsterman's Job. The lobsterman's job is to hunt down lobsters, trap them and bring them up to the bottom, and then enter these into the marketplace. The lobstermen are like the lions of the Serengeti Plains in East Africa. Has anybody had the opportunity to go there? Both predators seasonally follow their prey. In the case of the lions, their main prey is the wildebeest. Since lobstermen, most of the time, can't see down to the bottom from the surface, they can only guess what goes on down there. Most of the time, this guessing works as to where the lobsters are. And that's what we do so often, looking down all the time, wondering, where are they moving, where are they, all the time. Then, in this last paragraph, more or less tells about the power of the northeast storm. Many of you have seen the northeast and some of the effects from the shoreline. But this is how it actually affects the traps. What happens out there. The wave actions of the northeast often go down deep. Sometimes so strong that the stern action literally brings up to the surface, brings the bottom up to the surface, as seen by the brownish black water. These storms can also destroy marine and human life, flood and damage the coast, and even alter the intertidal zone. These commonly moisture-laden, unpredictable storm systems have plenty of water space off the East Coast to crank up sometimes hurricane-force onshore winds. The big northeasters pile up water at shore that turns low tides into high tides, creates storm surges, and riles up the ocean's top and bottom. The storms use these ingredients and the regular ebbing and flowing tides to weaponize the weight and motion of water, which both pummels exposed shoreline with bowling ball impact and scours the bottom with raging rivers. These rivers, especially in the strong tide areas, sweep away the traps. Both singles and trawls, bouncing many along the bottom and carrying others off the bottom. And the pots keep moving until either the wind abates or they get snagged, often against a rocky outcropping or another hung-down trap. In the end result, they'll form these huge bunches. But many of you have probably seen what happens in New Hampshire and Maine with rivers after heavy rains. The rivers will swell and that water starts going faster and faster. Same type thing happens along the shoreline after a rain from northeaster. That's how powerful that moving water is, between the weight and then the water in motion. When I first started, I naively thought that a lobster trap with 4 bricks in it would be heavy and it would stay in the bottom. No way. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just show about 40 different images that show different aspects of the lobster fishery and the lobster itself. And after that, I have some questions and answers. Let's start with these. So you can watch right there. Yeah. Now, one of the most commonly asked questions that I get, I'm sure all the other lobstermen, how can you tell a male lobster from a female lobster? Right? That's a nice person. This one here is a male lobster. All right. Well, yeah. This one is the female. Second one, yeah. But anyway, the female, you can tell just by looking down, the female's features are much, much smaller. The claws are more pointed and not as stout as those of the male. And same with the body right here, this part. Everything is just thinner and longer on the female. And also the tail is much, much wider. And the reason for that is female lobster has that wide tail to protect the eggs underneath what she carries. Male tail is very tapered. Notice that right away. So the male has large claws, very stout, large claws, stout body, and the tail is very, very tapered. Height. Okay, that's the female, yeah. And then you can flip the lobster over and look at the first pair of appendages in the abdomen. And the males are long and stiff. These are called gonopodia. Gonopodia, you see there's a pair, it's long, very stiff. And then the female's version, these are much smaller, they're soft and feathery. So that's the other dead giveaway. And here are some freshly extruded lobster eggs. You can tell the ones that have just been cast to the undersides of the lobster's tail are black. We call these lobsters the black eggers. And this usually happens in August, late summer, early fall. And the female will carry these for about another 8 to 9 months before they ripen, and the eggs will hatch, and the larvae will float free. Yep. And these are some eggs that are just about ready to hatch. See how swollen they are? Look at that, just about ready to hatch. And they'll slowly hatch, and the little larvae, and they'll go float to the surface. And there are some females that carry red eggs. And you don't get too many of these. I might get maybe 1 or 2 a year. But these red eggs mean one of 2 things. Either the eggs are healthy, and the way you can tell that they're healthy, if you look very, very carefully, at one of the eggs to see any sign of a developing lobster, the eyes, anything like that. But if they're just red, nothing inside, that means that the female extruded her eggs, and the eggs did not get fertilized. And they will just eventually rot. Now we're going to look at some, size extremes. Everybody loves to see a large lobster. And back in the early 70s, I made some offshore fishing trips to deep sea lobsters out of Gloucester. And we were fishing Corsair Canyon, which is outside of Georges Bank, about 250 miles southeast of Gloucester. And this was in January. And it was a trip of a lifetime. That particular trip, they dragged up 3 25-pound lobsters. And there was one lobster that just had one claw that weighed 31 pounds. So this one here is a 20, it's a big male lobster. Very hard shell, you need a sledgehammer to break through those shells. And here's the other extreme. That's a baby, that obviously hatched during the summertime, and then it floated up to the surface, and then shed its shell several times, and it dropped to the bottom. And look how small this little one is. Practically cover that with a dime. And the only reason that I saw this, I happened to look down into the gray deck, and I saw this little bit of a thing wiggling. Almost looked like a mosquito bite. And I said, can't be a baby lobster, can it? And sure enough it was. So I brought it home, put it in the watch glass, and took some close-up photographs of that. You hear about these, but to actually see one. And I think a lot of these drop out of the traps. This one was in the bait bag area, probably. When I hauled the trap over, just dropped out and settled on the deck. But most of the time they go unnoticed. And this little lobster, wow, might do already. And the lobster colors are just beautiful. You take time to actually study the different colors in the lobster's shell. I've seen every color in the visible light spectrum in the shell. If you look carefully, you can see some blues on the undersides. Look how pretty this is. And the lobster that just the shed of the shell has about the most vivid colors. Does anybody have an idea what's significant about these claws or the picture itself? Anybody want to take a guess? No? Well, you see this, the white marks at the edge of the claws? See this? Lobstermen, this means something to lobstermen. This means that the lobsters are on the move. And what we do, we call these claws traveler's claws. Traveler's claws. And what happens when the lobster's moving, grabbing these claws on the bottom of the line, it'll actually wear the pigment out along the edges. So you often see this especially in the fall of the year, lobsters start moving again. Some lobstermen refer to these claws as scruffy claws, but most of them call them traveler's claws. And lobsters grow by shedding their old shells. And obviously, it's quite a feat to be able to squeeze out of this old shell. So one of the first noticeable stages of this molting or shedding process is the top of the body will actually crack right down the middle like that. And lobstermen call these split backs. And at this stage, the female lobster will give off a pheromone. So I've talked to several lobsters, especially offshore lobstermen, and they say, when you get these split backs in the traps, they almost act as a bait to large male lobsters. So what will happen too, this side of the carapace will split off, and then that one. And then the lobster will actually squeeze out of its claws, withdraw, it'll shrink, expel water, and then it'll actually, expel right out of the old shell, and then the last part will be the tail, and then the little walking legs. Amazing, just amazing. And this goes on, this thing, year after year out there, under the water. One of the things that you can't see from the surface. Anyone have an idea what happened here to this lobster?
Striped bass ate it.
What's that?
The striped bass bit it.
No.
No.
Shell disease. You hear about this, you probably read about shell disease. And this is very common from Cape Cod south, especially off Rhode Island and Long Island. And what happens, this is just caused by microorganisms that eat the material in the shell, the chitin, and they'll actually honeycomb this. It's almost like corrosion and metal corrosion, same type thing. So these creatures are eating the chitin in the shell. And just about 2 weeks ago, I caught one lobster that had extremely bad shell disease, just about all over its exoskeleton. And the shell disease was so bad, you could actually squeeze in the side of the lobster. It was soft and rubbery. You could actually poke your finger right through it. And what happens, the shell disease afflicts lobsters who either been injured or their resistance is down. You know, it's out there, but the real healthy lobsters can fight it off. Now this particular lobster, if it sheds, it will shed this shell disease, the old shell, and shed disease off after a while. There was, about 3 years ago, there were a lot of these shell disease lobsters. Last year, very, very few, the same thing in the summer. And here are some of the other unusual things about lobsters. The unusual color ones. Blue, this is Frank Davis, a Rockport lobster. Yeah, blue. And the interesting thing about this, some of the different colored lobster shells are caused by genetics, and others it's caused by diet, a dietary deficiency. I've known lobstermen that caught a blue lobster, and they've contained this thing in what we call as a crate, lobster crate or car, and then fed it a regular diet, and within 2 weeks, the lobster color started changing towards a normal color. And this is one of the most rarest, unusual lobster colorations. And this lobster was trapped just like that off the coast of Maine 3 years ago. And the lobsterman donated to the state of Maine. And I know the scientist at that particular lab, and I asked her for a copy of this photograph. This is called a bicolored lobster, extremely rare. This is just as rare as the albino, the white lobster. But they're out there. And that's the natural color. Half of it, that red, green. We went through this during the rehearsals, so be patient. Either that or I'll have to draw. I'll have to substitute a draw, so I don't know if they'll come out. Now, lobsters are pretty clever creatures, and they'll make their own homes. Now, this shot was taken at a lobster farm from a dock looking down during the wintertime in the early spring when the water's very cold. But this is the same thing that happens